Hey, I think I might go ahead and get started. Seems like most folks are flowing in. All right. Well, first of all, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us for the fiscal year 24-25 Meet and Confer for the annual total compensation survey process. My name is Scott Sicleri. I'm the compensation manager for the state of Colorado within the Division of Human Resources. Before we get started, here's just a few things to keep in mind throughout the presentation. First, please use the Q&A function located at the bottom of your screen to enter in any questions you have. Note that questions will only be visible to panelists. We'll have time for questions at the end of the presentation, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can, but please note that we may not be able to get to everyone. Also know that we're recording today's presentation and will ensure that we have closed captioning for the posted version, which will be available on the Division of Human Resources website, along with this slide deck and an informational process document. So we go to the next slide. All right, so we'll take a quick look at the agenda. Note that the results and conclusions of this year's process are not yet known, and they won't be final until the annual compensation report is released. Today's presentation will focus on the process and the methodology used to complete the annual survey and market analysis process. So with that in mind, today we'll review the following topics: the state's labor market, the benchmark jobs that we use to compare our pay ranges to the labor market, our sources for gathering compensation data, our methodology for reviewing that data. We'll have a brief discussion regarding the process for state troopers, and we'll provide a quick update on the process for benefits. So we can go to the next slide. So to start, here are a few high-level notes about the purpose of today's presentation. So each year, the Department of Personnel Administration, specifically the Division of Human Resources, analyzes survey data to measure and compare the total compensation package offered to the state's classified employees. And I will say that we should note that this analysis only covers the classified pay structure. The annual compensation survey is conducted in an effort to maintain an integrated and market competitive compensation package. The purpose of the survey is to determine whether the class structure is current and accurate, whether established pay grades and relationships are appropriate, and whether specific classes should be revised, abolished, or created. Every year, all employees are invited to a Meet and Confer presentation to discuss and foster a better understanding of the entire survey process. So that's why we're meeting here today. All of today's documents, including the presentation, will be published on the DHR website at the link you see. Oh, I don't have it on the screen. It's at colorado.gov/DHR/compensation plans. And my apologies, I didn't have that on the slide. We'll make sure that that's available for you to review. So we can go to the next slide. So I'm going to read you a few words from a statute here. The state's total compensation philosophy is stated in Colorado Revised Statute 2450-104, which stipulates that it is the policy of the state to provide innovative total compensation that meets or exceeds total compensation provided by public or private sector employees or employers, or a combination of both, to ensure that the state is able to recruit, reward, and retain a qualified workforce. For purposes of the statute, total compensation is defined as a combination of base salary and all employee benefits. This includes both direct and indirect compensation. When we look at total compensation, we have more control over things like benefits, work-life balance, and workplace culture than we do for base compensation. Based on what we're doing at DPA and DHR, we can help your agencies implement best practices in each of these areas. We continue to work with the legislature and the executive to push for increased compensation. We'll go to the next slide. This slide illustrates the steps we take to complete, although many of these steps do overlap with one another. We'll cover each of these steps on the next few slides, but to summarize, the process is as follows. First, we identify the labor market. This is the market or geographic region in which the state competes for talent. Next, we identify our benchmark jobs. These are the jobs that we use to compare our jobs against the labor market, against jobs in the labor market. We also then identify the best possible sources of market data available, and we select the ones that are most relevant to our market. And then finally, the last step is to analyze and compare the external market data to the state's current pay practices. Our labor market includes, but may not be limited to, all regions of Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and Wyoming. We use both private and public sector data when conducting our analysis, since we compete with both the private and public sector for talent. When we look at the market data, company size is also considered. Company size can be determined by budget, number of employees, revenue, etc. When we select our benchmark jobs, we take steps to ensure that we compare our jobs with similar jobs in the external labor market. To do this, our class descriptions are compared to job descriptions in the surveys to make sure that we have the most relevant market data. Ideally, a benchmark job will be representative of all job families, have a high number of incumbents, and also be found in most organizations. Over the last couple of years, our benchmark jobs have stayed relatively the same. This year, we selected a total of 190, or 28% of the state's classified jobs as our benchmarks. We are also currently reviewing an additional 88 potentially new classes, which are associated with ongoing system maintenance studies. Keep in mind that maintaining the pay structure is always a work in progress. Since the labor market is not stagnant, it means that a competitive and logical pay structure will always be a moving target. The state of Colorado uses a robust survey selection that represents the industry standard in salary survey data. Fiscal year 2023-24 is a maintenance year. However, in full year reviews, our third-party contractor also develops a customized compensation survey. For any survey data the state uses, though, we ensure that the survey has been conducted by a reputable firm, the survey data is not self-reported, the survey is conducted on a continual basis as opposed to a one-time event, and the survey reports its data sources and the effective date of the data. In regards to health benefits and retirement offerings, the Employee Benefits Unit also has access to a national survey from Mercer, which is utilized whenever a review of the market for benefits is needed. So here is a sample list of some of the survey sources the state has used in the annual compensation survey. Not every source is used every year, and some sources are relied upon more heavily than others, but all sources are considered reputable organizations within the field of compensation surveys. When we collect and analyze our survey data, the most important step is to select the appropriate job match. The job match then becomes the benchmark job, which we discussed earlier in the presentation. To make sure the selected job match is appropriate, we review our class descriptions and we compare them to the definitions of jobs in the survey data. In most cases, we try to make sure that the duties of both the state job and the survey job are at least an 80% match. We also analyze other factors that are important to maintaining the pay structure. Not only do we want to make sure we're matching our jobs to those with similar duties, we also want to make sure that we're matching jobs that are in a similar level. For example, whether a job is an entry-level role, a senior role, managerial, etc. We also want to make sure that we're looking at the appropriate labor market. As we mentioned earlier, we use a mix of public and private sector sources, and we select appropriate geographic areas. For example, it might not be appropriate to compare our salaries to those paid in New York. Here's an example of a survey job description. Note that there are two components to the description. The first is what you might call the job family, or what we at the state might call the job series. The second component is the level. Both components are considered when matching our jobs to the surveys. This particular role appears to be a good fit for our accountant series. Because the survey job is intermediate and refers to someone who has working knowledge and experience, we would likely match this to our Accountant 2 classification. And here's an example of the actual salary survey data that we review. There's several items that we check, including but not limited to the accuracy of the job matches, the accuracy or the relevance of the labor market, and the range of salaries reported. We typically review both the average and the median data points in our surveys. We review data for base salary only, and we also review data for total compensation in our surveys. To ensure the best possible analysis, we also make additional adjustments to our data that take into account different geographic regions and the aging of survey data. The geographic adjustment puts the data in line with the state of Colorado labor market. We use data from the Economic Research Institute regarding average wage levels in the different regions of our labor market to make these calculations. Aging refers how salary survey data is adjusted to a common date. For example, if Mercer's data has an effective date of July 1st, 2022, and we want to calculate a market rate for July 1st, 2024, the data must be aged from July 2022 to July 2024. To do this, we use World at Work's prevailing market trend. The market trend is a percentage by which organizations increase their salary budgets and pay structures, and it's determined using salary surveys that include thousands of participants. That's the percentage that moves the structures forward in alignment with the market. When reviewing market data, we calculate various statistics to summarize that data and assess the state's competitiveness with the market. We look at the mean, we look at the median, the 25th, the 75th percentiles, in addition to other metrics. For assessing our pay ranges, the median is given more weight in the analysis than the average, as it's less likely to be impacted by outliers in the data. However, we also review the average salaries of our employees against actual salaries paid in the market. Pay practices for state troopers are compared to the market using a methodology that is defined by statute. In particular, the specific labor market that must be compared for state troopers includes the top 3 law enforcement agencies within Colorado having more than 100 commissioned officers and the highest actual average salary. To comply with that statute, we review each of our classification's job duties, and we identify comparable matches in the market. And then in addition to compliance with the statute, we also review market data from the top 5 law enforcement jurisdictions. And that's because it's in accordance with professional standards for compensation analysis. So we actually go above and beyond the statute in terms of how we analyze pay ranges for state troopers. For benefits this year, we did not complete a full review with Mercer, although we did complete a full analysis last year in fiscal year 22-23. Going forward, statute requires that we will conduct the full analysis quadrennially, which is every 4 years. So on the next 2 slides, we will quickly summarize the strategic approach and the purpose of our annual compensation survey, just to sort of wrap things up. Now, first, remember that the state reviews total compensation, which includes multiple components, both cash and non-cash benefits like health benefits or retirement. We continually compare all of these components to competitive market practices as required by the state's total compensation philosophy outlined in the statute. In order to achieve the state's total compensation philosophy, we obtain and then combine our market data to determine how our total compensation package compares to our labor market. This helps us understand where we're leading the market and where we may be lagging the market. That information is then used to design the roadmap for where we go with structure adjustments, system maintenance studies, and recommendations. That actually concludes our prepared remarks. If you have any questions, you can enter them into the Q&A section now, and I will go ahead and open that up and see what's already in there. We'll take a moment to read them before we start shouting out answers.
Thank you, Scott. And just as a reminder, if you could please read the question before you answer it so everybody can hear, that would be great. Thank you.
For sure. So the first question is, I was hoping this meeting might touch on the STEP proposal. I fall into a special category where the calculator that was released can't provide me with the data. I was in one job series for 13 years and then desired to learn new skills and transferred to a different job series, which is similar in pay range but has a different series title. It is my understanding the prior 13 years will not be considered my potential step raise. Can you touch on that, please? There is one example where a classification, the series is called General Professional, that will be counted towards step placement. In addition, there are certain trainee job classes that will also count towards step placement. So my recommendation for you is to get in touch with your local HR person. And if they are not able to help you, they can get with us and we'll be able to, with DPA, and we'll be able to provide a little bit more information. But without knowing more details about your job history, we can't answer that particular question. Annabelle, did you want to add to that? I thought I saw, oh, maybe you were just removing the,
Yep, I'm good. I'm just cleaning it up for you.
Okay, great. All right, so the next question we have, let me just read through it real quick. It says, do you have statistics on number of employees who applied for LTD benefits and were denied eligibility, both this year and in the past? How does this compare to other industries? Does UNUM have different eligibility criteria or a process that reduces eligibility? If any of the other HR leaders from DPA on the call would like to answer, please feel free. However, my recommendation would be to reach out to the DPA or DHR Consulting Services inbox, and they'll be able to better direct your question. That's a more technical benefits question that we would not typically cover in this presentation. The next question I see there is regarding a geographical adjustment. Could you give a detailed explanation of the process of how compensation from rural Wyoming or Utah is adjusted to make it relevant to Denver metro area compensation? Sure. So I mentioned the Economic Research Institute, which is a very reputable, it's actually a private company. It's not really an institute, but they are a very reputable compensation survey company. And one of their most commonly used pieces of data is their cost of labor calculator, which is a tool that they have that aggregates average salary information in a particular region or locality or whatever you tell them, whatever you ask it to. And they look at those average wages in comparison to the national average. So let's say rural Wyoming or Utah, the data shows that they have wages that are typically 10% lower than Denver, Colorado. Well, then that salary data that we get from Utah and Wyoming, we would adjust up by 10% so that it is more relevant to Denver, Colorado. So that's kind of how the geographical adjustment works. What direct impact does this have on non-classified employees? And again, I would reiterate for any of these questions, if any of the other DPA HR leaders want to speak up, please feel free. But the short answer to this is none. There could be some indirect impact, which, you know, that could be a little bit more complicated discussion of what those indirect impacts could be, but this analysis only applies to the classified pay structure. Next question is, what is the appeal process if compensation continues to be below local industry standards? To my knowledge, there is no appeal process regarding our market analysis. I believe there are only appeal processes for certain reallocations, but not for this particular process. There is no appeal process. Has professional development access, skills and knowledge been considered for compensation survey? It seems like the private sector likely offers more training, education, support to their employees. Some surveys include that sort of information. I actually, in my career, have not seen a lot of hard metrics around, budget or how commonly those particular practices are used. If anything, I would have seen something like, do you provide, a question in the survey like, do you provide compensation for obtaining additional skills or knowledge? And then it's like a yes or no answer. But I believe those are typically included in benefits surveys as opposed to compensation surveys. So if we do review that particular question, it likely won't be until the next quadrennial analysis, which I think is in a couple years. What benefits do remote and hybrid workers receive to support their work outside of state office space? Remote workers for other employers receive benefits such as internet service stipend, home office equipment, access to exercise facilities, etc. Has the state considered covering some of these costs which remote workers are expected to cover themselves? As of now, there are no, we have not had any discussions about introducing programs to help cover those costs. Make sure I read all of these questions here. What benefits do remote and hybrid workers receive to support their work? Yeah, as far as I know, from a statewide perspective, from DPA's perspective, there are no direct benefits that are provided to employees for office equipment. I believe there are certain benefits, such as you can have an ergonomic analysis. Somebody can come to your house and make sure that everything's set up in a way that will not increase your risk of arthritis or, that good stuff. But as far as a stipend, we currently have no statewide programs. Annabelle, your browser's up on the screen there. Oh, you're doing that on purpose, probably. Maybe not, I don't know. All right, we'll go to the next one. For STEP, what about related job classes, say move from contract administrator to purchasing agent? So for the next question, for STEP, what about related job classes, say moved from contract administrator to purchasing agent? All I can say right now from a factual standpoint is that time in your current series is what will count towards your STEP calculation. That is the best information I can give right now. That was what was negotiated during the in the partnership agreement, and as of now, that is the method that we'll use to calculate time in series. Percentage raise. So just to be clear, there is nothing that has been approved for next year. 3%, I think, is a number that has been circulated somewhat as a proposal, but there has been nothing approved for increases next year, and that includes STEPS. STEPS has not been fully approved by the legislature either. We still have not had it funded. So that's something to keep in mind. But to answer your question more generally, that would really be up to your individual agency. Agencies and appointing authorities have the ability to make decisions around individual employee pay. So, I can't say for sure whether your future increase will be based on top of your STEP or prior to your STEP. I can't say for sure about the individual situation. Sorry, I'm checking a few different things here. Multitasking. Comparisons or salaries, age and or sex considered. Maybe this falls under years of experience. How can we as stated know that our salary is comparable to a male counterpart? So the question is in the comparisons of salary, in the comparisons or salaries, is age and or sex considered? So I think you might be referring to internal comparisons of salaries. What this is talking about is external comparisons of salaries. So what the compensation surveys tells us is what other companies are paying for jobs that are similar to ours. The second part of your question is how can we as state employees know that our salary is comparable to a male counterpart? I would encourage, if you have concerns about that, reaching out to your agency HR team. There are laws that stipulate certain requirements around the public availability of state employee salaries. So those are that's also information you can explore. But as a first step, for more information about that specific question and some advice, I would recommend reaching out to your agency HR team. Why does the state seem to pay almost half or 3/4 for IT jobs like data management 3, 4, and 5 and data science positions? So this is sort of a technical question about a specific job. I can tell you, we are doing a system maintenance study on IT positions at the moment. If you don't believe that your pay is, if you do have questions about your pay, this is another situation that I would recommend reaching out to your local agency HR team or your supervisor. But, without having a big, data set in front of me, it's hard for me to assess the question about why we pay a certain percentage of the private sector for a particular job series. When choosing Mercer and seeing what they provided, do you also get a second opinion from another vendor to see how they compare? Well, officially, Mercer is our third-party consultant. They are a highly reputable firm globally and nationally and locally. I strongly encourage, if you're not familiar with Mercer, give them a Google, do a little research in the company. It's every organization I've worked at in my career and compensation, save for maybe one, has used Mercer to some extent. Now, more generally speaking, we do have other sources of data that we look at. And if we see something that looks weird or off or that we don't agree with, we absolutely do reach out to Mercer and ask questions. And, if they, need to update their analysis or we need to review something again, we certainly do that. This is a great question about compensation in general. Says, you mentioned identifying benchmark positions with the class title and description. Do you also consider working titles in the event that informs the level of technical expertise and average salary, et cetera? To be totally transparent about how compensation benchmarking is done, titles actually can be dangerous to use. We typically look at the duties and responsibilities of the role to match. Titles can be very misleading. I can think of, several examples. Well, we have a system maintenance study out there for IT professionals. I actually forgot the exact wording to that. Oh, well, there you go, IT professional. So I remember that's the title. We can't just use IT professional to benchmark a job because, that could mean many different things. But if we have a position description that says this job is responsible for writing code, developing applications, et cetera, well, then we might know it's an IT developer. So typically, we don't like to use titles, whether they're working titles or official titles, to benchmark our jobs. One more caveat, because there's exceptions to everything in compensation. One more caveat to that is, of course, we do look at the title because that can certainly be a good hint as to where you can start. But just to be perfectly clear, the actual thing that we look at to compare our jobs are the duties and responsibilities. So that's the class description. So two. Yeah, sure. So you're absolutely right. Post-COVID, we've seen historical movements in the labor market. You know, when I'm talking about this stuff, both with friends and professionally, you know, I think that the last time we had such an interesting time in the U.S. labor market was probably, early 20th century. It really has been a interesting time. So when we say 2.5% or 3%, I would never say that that's quote unquote appropriate. It might be appropriate depending on what market practices are that year. The reason we say they're typical is because historically, those are the percentages by which companies in the United States have increased salaries and structures. Usually, 2% has been the percentage by which structures will shift, meaning the ranges. And then 3% is the typical, historically, salary increase budget. You're absolutely right, though. The last few years it's been different. We've seen higher rates in the market data. You did also touch on one other piece, though. Inflation and salary increase budgets are not the same thing. Companies will typically consider inflation when making decisions about how they want to pay their employees. However, that's not the only thing they consider. There's budgets, there's plans, there's estimates they may make about future events in the labor market. So you might see headlines that say 9% inflation, but that does not necessarily mean that companies everywhere in the market are providing 9% increases. Can you send us the URL that points to the list of all state classified job titles with their associated pay ranges? And it looks like Annabelle just posted that. So it's if you go to the DHR Colorado website, right at the top, there's a drop-down menu that shows, I can't share my screen right now, but it says state HR professionals. And then right down there, you see a whole list of great resources. Pay plans is where you'll find yours. But regardless of my rambling, looks like they posted the URL. When you figure out the market median in the state of Colorado trying to say 15, the state of Colorado trying to stay 15%, 20%, or what is the general approach to that where SOC? So the state's total comp philosophy is specifically stated in statute, and that says our policy is to provide programs that meet or exceed market. So typically what that would mean would be market median. So the answer I would say is no. We are not trying to stay 15 to 20% less than that. We try to stay at the market median. But I also mentioned that's a moving target, right? So keep that in mind if you're ever looking out at the market.
Scott, can I remind you to repeat the question?
Yeah, for
Thanks.
sure. All right, this next one. Do you collect data in hiring processes as a potential check on efficacy? Specifically, we get declined by candidates for low salary, even at midpoints with some regularity, which is admittedly anecdotal, but leads me to wonder if you receive this type of info and if it's factored into any review or informs subsequent surveys of class types. As a comp analyst, one of the first questions I will always ask in any conversation about comp is, what does turnover, retention, and hiring look like? If you have a really long time to hire and other jobs have a much shorter time to hire, well, that could be an indication that maybe it's the pay range. Maybe it's not the pay range. Maybe it's the just lack of candidates in the market. Maybe it's you're not reaching the right candidates in your job posting. But short answer is yes. We don't factor that data into our sort of official annual compensation report, except to the extent that if we were to propose any kind of special changes, say we see that the market rate for an accountant has shot up 15%, and we need to increase that midpoint more than some of the other jobs. Well, then we would probably want to take a look at hiring, turnover, retention, that kind of thing for that role to make sure that whatever we do actually makes sense for the state. What is the state doing to attract very experienced and skilled staff if they keep paying very low? So, let's see here. So, I can really only speak to, facts and numbers. I can't say for sure that all jobs we pay low. I can't say for sure that all jobs we pay high. I would guess that probably some we pay high and some we pay low. But I can tell you there are a lot of other strategies other than pay that the state utilizes to attract the best candidates. We try to have the best, we have great benefits. We try to have the best hiring practices, such as making sure that we are active in our recruitment processes. But there's a lot of other things that we do as a state, work-life balance, remote work. That's a big one. It's a big benefit that we offer for those positions that can work remotely. That is another recruitment tool that we can use. My last company, I was not able to work remote. So that was a big reason why I came to the state. How is DPA making sure employees and classifications across agencies are being paid commensurate with their respective skills? There seems to be no oversight of HR departments by DPA, and pay can be misaligned even when work is similar. So it is important to remember that, DPA, we are not I almost hesitate to use this term, we're not the compensation police. Agency appointing authorities have the ability to pay employees according to their own practices. They do, of course, have to comply with the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. They have to be consistent with how they apply their pay practices. But as far as oversight from DPA, primarily our oversight comes in the form of managing the class descriptions and creating the pay plan each year. Employees have to be paid within their range. There's a few certain exceptions to that, but really that is up to the agencies to handle those sorts of questions. Again, I would say if you are concerned about your salary, you can, I would always recommend reaching out to your manager first. If you're not comfortable with doing that, reaching out to your agency HR person would be your best bet. Can you speak more to the likelihood of step increases this coming year? What is DPA's sense of its acceptance? I really can't speak to that. Anything I tell you would be my opinion, and I think that would be the case for anyone else right now. I mean, it involves the legislature, and I don't think we can properly state any kind of guidance about how the legislature will act. With huge increases in property taxes in Colorado, is the raise going to be considered to be more than the usual 3% or 5%? So just to reiterate, nothing has been approved. So no raise has been fully funded for next year. I can say, similar to inflation, when we look at our salaries and our pay ranges, we're reviewing what other companies are paying for those similar jobs. Increased property taxes may be a reason why some companies choose to provide increases to their employees. But typically, we look at that market data. We're not going to say, okay, well, market data says this, but property taxes increased by 15%. So that means we have to change our recommendation. We're going to look at what I call what typically is called in compensation, cost of labor, which is how the labor market is and in whatever particular region you're looking at. Should have gotten more water. Are there any talks to allow for an employee to move to another state to work? Many private employers allow for remote work from most anywhere. If the employee is willing to transport themselves back to Colorado when necessary, could that be considered? That's a good question. I would imagine that practices can vary by state, and I am going to let Laura handle that one.
Thanks, Scott. That is a great question. There is actually a constitutional requirement that state employees are residents of Colorado. So that is where that requirement comes from. And since it is in the Constitution, that would be much harder for us to change. But thank you for the question. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Laura. I will do my best to remember that. Full disclosure, I am in month 5 with my time here at the state. So thanks to all of you for your patience as I learn. So let me just read through this question very quickly before I answer. So this is really a question, I would say, about a individual case. The question is, we've been told that there's a salary survey being conducted, but we're having trouble getting, for our job, we're having trouble getting information about that survey or whether it's actually occurring. So again, that's sort of an individual case that it's hard for me to talk about on this call. I would say, I would need to know more details around what it is that you're referring to be able to provide any kind of an update or information. And, I would also need to likely involve your agency's HR team for any response. But if you would like to reach out with that question to the DHR consulting inbox, I think that would be okay to do. And we can provide some more info. So glad this was asked so I can clarify. If step raises are approved, you indicated that departments at their discretion have the ability to not award employees the step raise that would raise them to the amount or just the percentage increase if it's approved. So that's the, I apologize if I misspoke, but agencies, no employee can be paid below their step. No classified employee can be paid below their step. When I said that agencies can still pay as they see fit, they can do that as long as no one is paid below their step. And they also have to comply with equal pay for equal work. So for example, there are some agencies that instead of just looking at related experience within the state, those agencies also look at related experience outside the state. And they choose to set up their equity analyses and select their pay rates based on that calculation. Not every agency does it the same way. Not every agency has to do it the same way. As long as the agencies don't pay below their step, any employee step, and comply with equal pay for equal work and all other relevant regulations. You're very welcome, Natasha. I usually don't get a lot of fun feedback in compensation, but I really appreciate that. In the same division for nearly 10 years, and halfway during that time, the job series changed from one classification to another. This step is only to consider the time of the new series, and promotions were not allowed, so they only made an increase. So we are aware that there are certain situations out there where there may be 2 different series that are related. We are currently using time in series, not related series. We are planning to provide more information around that, around why that was selected, as well as just some more details around how things will be calculated. But for now, let me make sure I just read everything in your question correctly. The answer is yes, it will only consider time in your current series. The exceptions to that are general professional, the old general professional series, and certain trainee job classes. Next one is, do you compare against local government salaries? The answer is yes. Local government salaries would be included in that survey data that we review. So the survey data, when I look at a market rate for a job, I'm not looking at like every single employer that responded to the survey. I'm looking at an aggregate or an average or a median of those responses. But yes, absolutely, local government salaries will be included in those surveys. When a state classification is very broad, such as analyst or economic and community development, and is analogous to several jobs or professions with hugely varying salaries, how does the study weight these distinct jobs when calculating a salary range? Great question. So, you know, in a perfect world, every job that we have will have a perfect match in the survey data. As your question indicates, you probably already understand, not every job will have a perfect match in the survey data. You know, you specifically mentioned the analyst series. There are certain series out there that are very broad. And I would say, as of right now, analyst is one of those series where we do not make a direct match in the in our market data. So the way that we would review those pay ranges is we'll take the market data for several other jobs in the classified structure that are similar to what an analyst might be. So, you know, well, a financial analyst or a business analyst. Struggling to think of like multiple series that come to mind, but we would typically look at multiple classes in order to make sure that we were selecting an appropriate range for the analyst series. Now, the last caveat I'll make there, and I should be careful here because we have very limited capacity to do these every year, but we do have something called system maintenance studies. System maintenance studies are the way that we can take a look at certain aspects of our pay structure. Say we have a series like IT professional that we realize we want to have multiple series fit into that current series. So IT professional, nothing's final with it, but it's likely that we'll be breaking that out into IT development, IT infrastructure, IT business analysis, network services, all that good stuff. So it is possible that one day we may decide to do that for the analyst or economic and community development series. So kind of another rambly answer there, but that's a really good question. And you're absolutely right. It is much more difficult to benchmark roles that have a much more broad set of duties. When will the state legislature meet and vote on the proposed step increases? Now, I believe that is when the long bill is signed. So it would be March. Laura?
Yes, so the legislature has the full session to be able to vote on any of the budget requests that they receive. The long bill, I think, is typically signed in May. So they would have up until that point to vote on the proposed step increases. And obviously, we would hope that we would have that vote completed before May, but that is the time frame that they have until to be able to vote on it.
Thanks, Laura. Once I've gone through the process over a whole year, I'll be able to spit that out real easy. In regards to staff who do not use state medical insurance and therefore do not receive the benefit of the state paid share, has the state ever considered reimbursement of the state share back to the staff member? I don't know. That is a question I think that we would need to review with the benefits unit in particular. I would also have to research that perhaps with some folks who have been here longer than I. As far as I know, the answer is no. But that could be something we'd want to look at in the future. It's a good question. Does equal pay for equal work mean pay within an equal pay range posted for a position or the exact same salary? So if you're not familiar with the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act, I definitely recommend giving it a Google. There's some really good, you don't have to read like the whole thing. There's some really good articles out there. Colorado really sort of led the way in it's not the only state that has a bill like this, but it's a lot of commonly proposed practices out there to sort of combat what the act is intended to combat. Now, I get excited about this stuff because I'm very passionate about compensation, but as to answer your question more succinctly, maybe what it means is that we have to be consistent in how we apply pay practices across the board. By consistent, generally that means if I have a policy that says, if you have 10 years of experience, of related experience outside the state, then we're going to pay you at midpoint. Well, then I can't say to someone else just because I don't like them, well, you have 10 years of experience, but we're going to pay you at the minimum. That would not be compliant with the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. It does specifically mention gender, but in reality, the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act protects everyone. How is other duties as assigned research for compensation comparison? Well, I would say other duties as assigned, you won't see that in most survey. Well, you might see it as a standard thing that's tacked on to the end of a survey description, but typically when you see that in a job description, the intent of that is there might be a very small percentage of the person's job, 5%, maybe a little more than that, where they just have to do certain tasks that any of us might need to do. I don't know, maybe at my last job, it wasn't specifically said in my job description, but I would go and I would assist with, benefits enrollment. I'd go sit in the cafeteria and, sit at a computer and help folks sign up. So you might say that might fall under other duties as assigned. Now, am I going to go out and find out what that exact other duty was for every single job in the state? No. But I would say that if you think that other duties as assigned are representing like a really big portion of whatever position you're talking about is doing, then you probably ought to talk to your manager or your HR person to see whether or not your job description is accurate. Because that other duties as assigned really should be only a minimal part of anyone's job. So, when applying for a promotional opportunity, how does higher education compare to professional experience? Is the education degree considered in fair and equitable compensation? Often it seems that experience is more highly valued. Yeah, generally speaking, yes. Someone's education and skills, I would say it's skills. Someone's education background is going to be considered when you're benchmarking a job against the market or when you're determining individual salaries. I would imagine different agencies do take different approaches to this, but right now, if I had to say my understanding of the state's sort of position on this would be that we don't favor one or the other. There are certain jobs that require education or certifications, you can't be a nurse if you're not an RN, if you're not a registered nurse, but and there might be certain managers that put more weight on education than they do on experience or vice versa. But as a state, my understanding is that we do not weight one of those more than the other. So one of the attendees mentioned that anything passed by the legislature this winter would not go into effect until July 1st, 2024. And that is correct. Yes, everything that we do now, and this is definitely something I'm getting used to, having come from the private sector, but everything that we're doing now, the system maintenance studies, the market analysis, all that, we will make proposals that go into the annual comp report that will be published on November 1st. But then if those proposals are accepted, they won't be implemented until July 1st, 2024, the start of the next fiscal year. So what is STEP for new employees to better understand? So that is a very big question, but to be, provide we got the STEP program webpage in there for you, but real high level, it is a program that is intended to address some equity issues that we have at the state that will provide compensation based on an employee's time within their current job series. Now that's a sentence or two there that describes something that we could probably talk about for hours. So I would definitely recommend you start by going to that website, take a look at some of the frequently asked questions. I believe that actually is one of the frequently asked questions that's on there. So take a look there. And if you do have any other questions, best bet is to start with your agency HR team. If they can't help you, they can come to us. But again, please know we will be releasing a lot more information in the next few weeks, in the next few months. Just there are a lot of details we haven't sorted out yet. And we also want to make sure that we're providing unified messaging across all the different agencies and all the different stakeholders. Looks like we got through all of the questions. Wow, we have 3 minutes left. Or I guess we can stick around too if there are more, but all right. Current job series does not contain anything that I can find for senior OIT programmer. So for your question, depending whether you're classified or non-classified, if you're non-classified, this does not apply. This review, this does not apply to your role. If you're classified, that sounds like what you have indicated is your working title. So we do not use working titles within state, like within DPA. We look at your system job title. And right now, your system job title will likely be in one of those classifications that is currently undergoing a system maintenance study. So that's IT technician, IT professional, IT supervisor, and IT manager. So we are currently in the midst of doing a review of those. If you want to take a that actually, just so you know, the review began in 2019, then was sort of nixed due to COVID and all the budget, the budget crisis and all that. So we're now sort of revamping that. We are making changes to the original proposal, but if you want to get a sense for what the new classifications and new series will be, go to the DHR website. You can go to the state HR professionals drop down at the top and click on system maintenance studies. And you can actually see some of the documents that were produced in 2019 for that IT system maintenance study. So that's probably the best information I can give based on what I see is your working job title. And I do, if you're curious about how that process works, I recommend going to that website. And yeah, we've got the link posted there. Some of it is a bit dry if you're reading through it, but I think if you can get through the whole description of the study, it's pretty interesting and very informative. So that'll be a good resource. Don't see any other questions. One more coming in here. Why do different classifications have the same pay grade, even when their work differs? For example, Analyst 3 and Community Economic Development 3 are both age 19. Yeah, I mean, it's totally possible that two different jobs can have the same market rate or very similar market rate. I don't have the market rates for those. Well, we talked about those series just a minute ago, but I don't have the market rates for those roles in front of me, but if two roles have similar market rates, then yeah, they should have similar pay ranges, even if the work differs. Thanks, Christy. It feels great. Like to get that feedback. Much appreciated. Annabelle, Laura, do we want to, anything else we want to add or think we're good to go?
I don't think so. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Scott, too. Good job.